Hey everybody, it's Mike Schumann of the Daily Hoosier for another episode of East 17th Street. I am joined by Seth Tao. And Seth, the last time we were on here, we were talking about a roster that had been decimated, basically down to nothing. And a couple weeks later, not too big of a surprise, it's turned the corner. I guess you could say they have 8 players, depending on how you want to describe Luke Goody's current situation. At least 7, including 3 in the last few days here. It's been a dramatic shift. The doomers out there can take a deep breath. I think there was a lot of panic on social media that, what's going on? Why doesn't Indiana have any players? You see how quickly this has changed. So I think we can't call this an emergency podcast because we didn't have a sense of urgency to do this as each one came out. But we do want to go through the 6 portal additions that have come through the door. If not, I don't think Indiana has actually announced anybody yet. So I can't say officially, but we fully expected all these guys are going to sign with IU. You never know in portal world. But I want to go through each one of them.
What's interesting is you say that. I hadn't even thought about that until you just said that. But yeah, you're right. The men haven't announced anybody, but the women's team has been announcing players pretty much instantaneously as they've pulled players. Right. So I wonder what's going on there. That's an interesting point.
And as I remember back to last year, it wasn't quite like this. I mean, I think, the news broke, and a couple of days later, there was a release from IU with quotes and everything else. So I don't know if they're just so distracted and busy with everything that they're just not messing with it, and they're going to kind of do it all at once, or what the case is. But it has been strange to see that. And I know that, it comes as a surprise to nobody in the world of the transfer portal that there's some big high dollar contracts and things like that got to be ironed out. So I don't know how much of that's a part of it as well. Hey Ollie, how we doing, bud? For YouTube viewers, Ollie needs some loving right now.
To say hello. He seemed like you wanted to say hello, but with this more zoomed in angle we have, I thought he was off screen.
I think he somehow senses that he's part of this show. I think
he's ever since I got him, he's been funny like that. Like he'll just be laying around, but then I'll have a phone interview pop up that's on speakerphone, and he'll come right up to me for attention in that exact moment. It's like he knows what's going on.
Could be a little fit of jealousy there.
He is a very jealous dog.
So let's go through each one of these 6 guys that have been announced or the news is broken here in the last couple weeks. Starting, we'll go reverse chronological order, starting with a very intriguing guard who was announced last night, Tatton Connorway. I'm going to probably struggle with his name because I have you ever heard of anyone named Tatton as a starting point?
I don't think I think he's the first Tatton that has come across my world.
Yeah, same here. Conference player of the year for Troy. Average 14 points a game. What really stands out to me more than anything, if you look at the stats on KenPom, top 20 nationally in both steal rate and assist rate, which those are standout numbers. When I say top 20, that's among all players in college basketball, Division I. So, and he's 3rd in steal rate. So he averaged 2.9 steals per game, which is just a very impressive number. I don't know. I think you call him a combo guard, probably more likely to play point guard. Probably, look at him right now as Indiana's starting point guard as things stand at the moment. If there's a knock on him, it's going to be his 3-point shooting, 27% last year, career, maybe a hair higher than that. 3-year guy at the junior college level, 2 years at Troy. I think if I'm remembering that right, which brings about probably the most interesting question in my mind about him right now is how much eligibility does he have left? Because there's that issue going on right now with does JUCO time count at all, and if it doesn't, if it does count, then he shouldn't have any eligibility. So there's clearly some thinking that he does have eligibility. And if he's only played 2 years at D1, does he have 2 years left instead of one? I'm not really sure about that yet. But I guess, have you paid any attention to that as that's evolved? And do you have any thoughts on, how that might play out for him?
It seems like it's been handled on like a case by case basis, and I feel like every time I poke around about this issue, it seems like I get a different result spat out at me. So I don't I believe at least what I know is nothing is really, you're right that I think it's up in the air. Nothing is definitive yet with it, as far as the eligibility question with that. So I'm not. I guess I don't really know when all of that would become clear, but I mean, you're right that I mean, if I don't think they would have gone through with the recruiting. They wouldn't have gone to the steps they did in recruiting him, and obviously having him commit. Offering him in a way that allowed him to commit. I don't think they would have gone through with any of that if they didn't think he was going to have any eligibility. So it,
Yeah.
it it might just be a question of how much eligibility versus yeah, I get, like I said, they wouldn't have gone through with the amount that they did if they didn't think he was going to have eligibility, but we don't really know yet, so that will be something to continue to watch. So you could maybe throw him in the same bucket as Luke Goody.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, except that like you said, I do think he at least has it for this year, and I don't know that good he does for sure yet.
well
But
well putting him in the same bucket of just being questionable as far as that goes with Goody.
yeah, yeah. I feel like at some point I heard that like all JUCO years would be like combined and viewed as like 1 year, and then if that was the case, then he'd only have one left, like the one JUCO year and the two D1 years. But if JUCO is just completely disregarded, then he'd have two left. So I'm not really sure. I'm not sure anybody knows, to be honest. Like
I
the
don't know that the
NCAA,
NCAA themselves know.
and I don't even know that they feel like when they say that they know that they feel like that's going to hold up, because they're just going to get hit with a wave of lawsuits no matter what they do.
Right.
So he's going to be an interesting one to watch. I guess you can say 1 year, maybe two. I think that's how I described it when I wrote about him, because I just wasn't sure. I've seen people say he has 1 year. I've seen people say he has two. So I don't think anybody knows. But he looks like a very physical guard. He looks like a very facilitative oriented. Not sure that's the right way to describe that, but he looks to facilitate. He's not like a shot chucker by
Passing
any.
oriented.
There you go. That's better. So I think when you surround him by guys that we're going to talk about, like Lamar Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, maybe Luke Goody, it could be a really good scenario where he can score the ball. He's shot 57, 58% from two. I mentioned the poor shooting from three, relatively poor, but I think this is where the coaching is going to come in. It's like, what are these guys' strengths? You're not going to expect them to post the numbers they did at low major or mid major, but what can you bring out of them over the next 6 months and actually form a functioning team? I think if Indiana's got a competent coaching staff here, that's where the real magic happens, it seems to me.
Yeah, and something else I think that's worth noting with Connorway, and it may not apply for every single one of Indiana's players, but it definitely does for several. He's been a part of winning teams the last
Mm-hmm.
couple of years at Troy. I mean, they went to the NCAA tournament last year. They had 20 wins in both of the seasons at Troy, and obviously that's not just him; that's a whole team thing. But I feel like you compared it on Twitter, I think, to the way Kurt Signetti views everything, production over
Yeah.
potential and everything. And you want, if you're Darian DeVries, you want to bring in guys that are winners. And obviously winning players could play for losing teams in theory, because basketball is a team game after all. But it's a good sign when you're digging into players, if you look at how their teams fared and their 20 win season, like that's a good sign.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt about it. Hours before Connorway was announced, news broke that Josiah Miles had committed. And I think he was a name that I had not personally heard until the weekend. And then news broke that he was visiting Monday. news broke on Monday that he was visiting on Tuesday. So this one just kind of came out of left field, and then he committed on Wednesday. So he's a North Florida product, originally from Miami. I would call him a wing 6'6". I don't see him as really having primary ball handling skills, but he's not really a power forward either. So wing is the best place I could put him. A guy that, as Chaz Lanier exited North Florida, he seemed like he took on a massive step, saw massive shot volume, crazy 3-point volume, like 7 to 8 threes per game he took this past season, and didn't shoot it particularly well, 33% from three this past year. But really what pops to me when I watched his highlight reel is he's a very good athlete. I think he is a Big Ten athlete. He rebounds at a really high level, 6.8 per game for a 6'6" guy is really good. And I just wonder, kind of going to that point of coaching and role definition, if you bring him in and cut his 3-point volume in half, take, instead of 8 threes a game with questionable shot selection, maybe 4 a game with good shot selection, I'm guessing that percentage will go up. I'm guessing that the staff likes what they see in terms of the shot mechanics and potential as a shooter, but just maybe having a different definition around it will help him out a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, also worth noting that, he shot 33.5% from three this year, but that was, he shot 29.9% from three his first season. So, I mean, he improved a solid amount. I mean, that's not nothing, to go from, and obviously the volume took a huge jump from, he attempted 1.9 threes per game as a freshman up to 5 point, or that's twos, excuse me. No, that's threes. Wait. 2.7 threes per game to 7.3 per game as a sophomore. And so, that's a huge increase in volume, obviously. Look, he played 31.7 minutes per game at North Florida this past season. I'll go out on a limb and say that's probably going to go down in the minutes per game. You would figure, just, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he ends up, in the starting lineup. Maybe he ends up playing a big role, but with all the other pieces that are coming in, you'd figure he might go down into the 20s, it's, high 20s, something like that. And so, but also, I mean, going from a school like North Florida to a place like Indiana, he's going to have more around him. He doesn't have to take 7.3 threes per game because he's going to have more guys around him who can make plays.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I suspect they have no intentions for him to take that many shots. One thing notable with Josiah Miles, he's coming in as a junior. So as this roster developed early on, one thing that really stood out to me is they had a lot of guys going into their final year of eligibility. But he clearly, unlike Connorway, who's not clear, Miles clearly has 2 years left. So, he's a guy that could be around for a couple of years, so that as that 26 27 roster starts to take shape, you got him and Trent Sisley at least projected there.
And he may be the first Josiah I've come across too.
Yeah, well, let's see if we can keep that going. I guess not, because I was going to transition to Lamar Wilkerson. Not a lot of young people named Lamar that I can think of off the top of my head, but clearly a common.
Really? Lamar Jackson?
Okay. Well, I choose to not think of that name. Yeah, that you just sunk Lamar Wilkerson's my appreciation of him considerably, making that connection. But let's pick it right back up, because he's always going to be the guy from an Indiana fan perspective that chose IU over Kentucky. That's like probably the first kind of marquee moment of the DeVries era at Indiana is Lamar Wilkerson choosing Indiana over Kentucky. He had a very memorable quote in a podcast on Field of 68 the other day where he said he didn't want to just be another guy at Kentucky. And I think Kentucky fans kind of took that the wrong way. Like I think they, they showed some outrage with that, but I thought it was actually a compliment to at least the talent level that Kentucky's had through the years. That it's hard to distinguish yourself there because they've had so much talent. But however he intended it, he did in fact choose Indiana over Kentucky. It became a two-team race at the end. He is a guy that played at Simon Scott Assembly Hall in December and scored 18 points, made a couple threes. I don't think he or anyone else at the time knew that he would be playing for Indiana this upcoming season. But the reason he was so coveted, also recruited by Auburn and Ole Miss, is because he clearly, unlike the first two we talked about, he clearly is an elite shooter. He's got a long track record, including 43% this year, just a hair above 40% for his career on very high volume. He's a guy that Indiana will come in and take that high volume 6-7 threes a game, really stretch the floor. Great complementary piece in my mind to Tucker DeVries in terms of having two guys that give you just elite spacing and elite potential to make threes.
Yeah, and I mean, he scored over 20 points a game. You're not just gonna, grow guys like that on trees who can do that at the college basketball level. So you're right. Pairing him. I'd said on the previous podcast that guys who come in now after DeVries can kind of come in feeling like they don't have to be the guy. And even if Wilkerson says, I don't want to just be another guy at Kentucky, I want to be, I want to help run the show at Indiana. Like, he still doesn't have to come in feeling like it's all on him. It's him or nothing.
Right.
With Tucker DeVries there next to him, they have another guy there who can, if Wilkerson has an off night, he doesn't have to feel like, he left the world down, but he has help coming in here. He can come in here not feeling like he has to be the trailblazer,
Yeah, and I guess to take a step back. I mean, we're talking about these guys with these gaudy numbers. You mentioned the Signetti comparison. Like, do you think it's like what's reasonable here? Like, I remember last summer all the talk was all these James Madison guys coming to play football for IU. Can they translate? Like, what's reasonable for guys like this that average 20 at a mid-major level come into the Big Ten? Like, if you wanted to be a simpleton about it and add up all their points per game, you'd say, okay, Indiana's going to average 100 points a game next year because all these guys are big producers. But like, give me kind of the contrarian view of it. Like, how do you think this is really going to play out with these guys? Because the next few we're going to talk about are big producers as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously just two different ways that it can always go, and you look around you look at the way Indiana's operated the last few years. They've had transfer hits, they've had transfer misses. You look around the conference, plenty of other teams have had transfer hits, they've had transfer misses. It's not a 0% chance that Wilkerson comes in and can keep scoring 20 points a game, but it's probably not likely. But also, Wilkerson could go down to 15, 16 points a game, and he would still be having a really nice season for Indiana. Like,
right.
He doesn't necessarily have to be that, among the top scorers in the country to come in and do a good job for Indiana. Like, plenty of teams form like this with lots of transfers, and, bringing in guys like this with all the stats, they may not hit on all of them, but if you hit on enough of them, then you're in good shape. So, as I always say, time will tell. We'll see how it all plays out. But I mean, you'd rather bring in guys like that than bring in. I mean, there's always different paths you can go, but I mean, at least from an Indiana perspective, you spent the last couple of years, Miles Rice and Kanan Carlisle came in with lots of expectations, but certainly didn't have the production that Lamar Wilkerson is going to come into Indiana with. So, as fans, you all can, decide and debate which profile you would rather have in a player, but it can't be a bad thing to bring in a guy like Wilkerson with the statistics he has to his name.
Yeah, and I keep hearing a lot of skepticism from fans, and I think if you're Darian DeVries, it's probably a good place to be. Like, I don't see much appetite from the fan base to hype transfers, talk about their stats. there wasn't a lot of hype for DeVries himself when he was hired. Everybody just wants to actually see this thing be proven on the court. So it's probably a good place to start from, that this isn't going to be a season that, I suspect Indiana is going to start entering top 25s here and all that stuff, somewhat soon. But I just don't think the fan base is really going to buy in until they see results on the floor. It's just been too long with too many iterations of coaching staffs that didn't pan out for them to do that. If it had been another hire, maybe, but I think DeVries kind of fits right into that same sentiment as the fans. I think there's alignment there. Want to go on to Reed Bailey, a 6'10", 6'11". I've seen him listed at different heights, forward / center, depending on who you talk to or how you want to view it. From Davidson, another high producer, 18.8 points, a ton of assists and rebounds as well. So I think of him as a stretch four, but I think if depending on how you want to play and what matchups are, it could be a small ball five. It could give you really great spacing with some of these other guys we're talking about. Shot 40% from three on low volume, but certainly has the threat to do that and continue to grow that aspect of his game. I think the question on everybody's mind, and we'll get into what they still need, is can he play the five in the Big Ten? I think that's the number one question when people think about Bailey.
Yeah, that's the obvious question. Is he going to be able to handle, and I mean, playing the five, period, but also, within the Big Ten, and you look around and how this conference has played basketball through the last couple decades, and that's a whole separate conversation. But what is he going to, assuming that things don't change in a drastic way that would benefit the conference, is he going to be able to handle the physicality that comes with playing the inside in the league? And that will determine whether this is a successful whether he's a four, whether he's a five. I mean, it's going to be the same question, and that is the answer will determine whether this is a successful transfer portal ad or not. I mean, the stats all back it up. His profile fits what Indiana would look for. I made the joke with you. Both the names Reed and Bailey both have history at Indiana, for better or for worse.
Right.
And so, he's got the background that generally would fit what Indiana's looking for, but it's just a question of, is he going, what is he going to be able to handle that physicality of playing inside in the Big Ten?
Yeah, no doubt. And Wilkerson has a history with Indiana as well. Two former well-known Wilkersons played for Indiana as well. So for a coaching staff that seems to want to kind of distance themselves from the past, they're stepping right into it.
and hey, there was a Tucker just this past year.
Yeah, there you go. the past is prologue. Is that what I'm supposed to say? What speaking of past, DeVries, interestingly enough, has two players from his past that are coming to Indiana, and I think it sets up something really interesting. Like, you think of the situation where you're starting from scratch, completely rebuilding your roster from nothing, but he's gonna have at least two players that know his system, have played for him in the past, maybe three. There's a prospect out there, Kevin Overton, Texas Tech transfer, who played with the next two guys, Connor Enright and Tucker DeVries, on Drake under Darian DeVries in 2023-24. Enright played for DeVries for multiple seasons, guard, kind of like Connorway, where I could say point guard / combo guard. I think he could play off the ball. He didn't shoot it very well last year. 30, gosh, that one's escaping me. I think 32% is where he ended up. Yeah, 32.5 Connor Enright for DePaul last year, but he shot 43% for Drake the year prior. I had a chance to interview him for this very podcast last week, and he said, and I haven't verified this, I'm sure he's not making it up, that his shooting numbers this past season were much better before he suffered a shoulder injury that ended his season in the January-February timeframe. And he's still not back to playing full contact basketball and won't be until late June, early July, I think he said. So, but he's a guy that is gonna. I think he's just gonna be like one of those kind of glue guys, program guys. You you mentioned Reed. Several times I've watched his highlights and thought of Neil Reed. He reminds me a little bit of him in terms of his size and skill set and his toughness. And yeah, ironically enough, or coincidentally enough, Neil Reed also had a shoulder injury and had to wear a brace just like Connor Enright did. So those two keep popping in my head in tandem just to keep that theme going. But he averaged 7.5 points per game and 6.2 assists, really high assist rate for DePaul last year. I think if they get this roster the way they want it, he's going to be coming off the bench kind of guy. May already be because of Connorway and Miles, but whatever role he plays, I think he's coming in for the right reasons. Really enjoyed his time under DeVries at Drake and wants to just see this thing work out in what will be his final year of eligibility.
Yeah, I mean, the role, like you mentioned, is going to be really interesting because, I mean, his numbers slack behind all these other guys that they've brought in, and but he does have the familiarity with DeVries in his system. He was was he the first to commit officially? I mean, obviously Tucker DeVries was
Yeah,
basically a lock, but he was the first to officially commit, right?
yeah, if you don't count Tucker, like I think the
Right.
news on Enright actually broke before Tucker, but we all knew Tucker
Right,
was
right,
coming.
right, right. So, I mean, but obviously, Enright came in before all these other guys, and he had to know. It would be surprising if he came in not knowing or not thinking that, that would be a possibility that he may end up coming off the bench. But you need guys like that when you're building out a roster, especially when you basically have nothing coming in, you need guys that are willing to play that role coming off the bench. Most guys go into the portal not thinking they're going to go somewhere and come off the bench. They go in looking for more playing time, looking for a bigger role, looking to enter the starting lineup. And
Right.
For Indiana, they may need Enright to be this guy willing to come off the bench, but that doesn't mean he's not important.
Right, for sure. Yeah, like we've talked about before, and I think we'll mention here again, finding the bench guys out of the portal is the hardest part. And I think he's not going to be okay with that, but I think if that's the way it turns out, he's
That's
not going to be a problem.
that's not the right terminology, but
Right, right,
you get what I'm going at.
right, sure. So I guess Tucker DeVries, it's so funny because he's probably the best player on the team, like two-time Missouri Valley Player of the Year last year, 15 a game and 47% from three before he got hurt at the high major level. So he's kind of already proven himself at high major. We're kind of forgetting about him because he was just always been assumed from the jump. But, you think about him at 47%, Wilkerson at 44%, Enright, if he can get back to his prior year at 43%. I mean, and Bailey at 41%. That is something very different than we've grown accustomed to over the last few years. I think both from a percentage and a volume, I think we're going to see a completely different look, and he's probably going to be at the center of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Indiana, you could not ask for a better player to kind of get everything started as far as building your roster, build a guy to build your roster around. Obviously, I mean, plenty of guys come in, and have the coach's kid come right behind them, but very few of those coaches' kids are two-time league
Yeah.
player of the year. Have the track record that Tucker DeVries does. I mean, there's very little reason to think that Tucker DeVries cannot come in and really excel at a place like Indiana in the Big Ten. I mean, obviously, he only played 8 games at West Virginia last year before he got hurt, but I mean, he scored almost 15 points a game in those 8 games, and there was, again, like I say, there was all reason to believe that he was going to continue playing well for West Virginia before that, until that injury happened. And I mean, Indiana should be thrilled to have, obviously, I mean, Darian DeVries is going to be happy to have his son still with him, but I mean, the rest of these guys coming in around DeVries, I mean, he took Drake to the tournament. He got Drake to the tournament 2 years, or no, it was 1 year. Excuse me. He started after that year where they were or no, it was 2 years. Anyway, he went to the tournament with Drake for 2 years. Um, a winner like his dad is, and there's every reason to think that this is a guy you want on your team. I mean, Tucker DeVries would probably be a starter on every team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I don't think there's much doubt about that. And I would go a step further to say if he can pick up where he left off at West Virginia last year, he's competing for a roster spot in the NBA at 6'7" with very skilled and can shoot, north of 45% from three. He's at least on the radar for that.
I mean, this is a guy who very plausibly could be a preseason first team All Big Ten.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how that's handled for sure. But yeah, so those are the 6 portal additions. I want to put you on the spot. I want your prediction for Luke Goody. Like he's the guy everybody wants to ask about and talk about. I have no idea what to say because like all I can say is his facts don't line up with what's traditionally approved. But as we alluded to earlier, I don't think there are any like rules, or I don't think anybody knows how anything's going to be handled. I could see anything from basically every request that's been issued is going to just be blanket approved, or there's going to be a wave of lawsuits. But what's your prediction? What do you see for Goody?
I have no idea. Like you say, it seems like, and we talked about it before with Connorway, just every case has been handled differently with all of this stuff. It feels like there's a new set of rules every time this stuff comes up sometimes. And it's just, you're right. It's not the traditional extra year of eligibility request. It doesn't meet the usual, guidelines and all of that. But I really don't know, because you're right that it could trigger a wave of litigation, and you're getting really down the rabbit hole there. And would it be? There's a chance it could just be easier for the NCAA to blanket approve everybody. So, look, Luke Goody himself, it's been pretty quiet on his end. It's not like he's coming out and making a very loud public push of any sort. So, I mean, maybe you think that's a good sign if it's all been quiet. If he thought it wasn't going to go his way, maybe he'd be out tooting his own horn a little bit more. But I really don't know what to expect. I don't know when this is going to be clarified. I don't know what to really expect with Luke Goody. You basically kind of have to leave him as a footnote on the roster, it feels like.
Yeah, and that's what we've been doing. But I went back and looked. Xavier Johnson's request was approved on April 26th. So if that is the rough indicator of timing, we're looking at a couple more weeks here. Assuming that he's on the roster, and I want to mention true freshman 4-star Trent Sisley. The position that they don't look like they have any need for additionally is that kind of what I would call almost like a combo forward. I would put Sisley in that category, Goody in that category, Tucker DeVries in that category. All could play the 3 or the 4. All can shoot the ball. They're very similar players, so I don't think there's much need there. But looking at the rest of the if we say we got 5 more spots to fill here, I think what's clear to me that they definitely need is some sort of rim protecting, more traditional, bigger, big man, big fella. Need a big fella.
Careful, you might trigger some bad memories.
Do you agree with that? I mean, I don't, even if you are convinced Bailey's the starting center and you want to play him every game, 35 minutes a game at center, I still think you need somebody in that with that role definition as a rim protector and a kind of playing that dunker role.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if it's just a guy to come off the bench and spell Bailey if he's going to dominate the minutes. But I would think that they'd need somebody who can come in and play more of a role as sort of the bench 5 and like we keep saying, somebody who can handle the physicality of the Big Ten, who can be that way on both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively. So, yeah, that's really the clear biggest need remaining on the roster, is just to build out the front court depth.
Yeah, and I would also say from a class balance standpoint, they need to the latter ads would be more beneficial if they were younger. I mean, obviously, you take the best players you can get, and if they can get older guys who are at least open to competition and may have to take a step down and come off the bench, you would certainly take that as well. But it wouldn't be a bad thing to get some younger guys who maybe have a bit to prove. I think there's a guy from Lafayette named like Alex Chaikin who's a freshman and shot 47% from three. You think about somebody like that who probably has to prove that he's able to play defense at a Big Ten level, but man, the upside for somebody as a freshman that can shoot 47% at any level of D1 would be somebody that would be enticing. So, and potentially freshmen as well. Like there's a guy that decommitted from Iowa, Des Briscoe from Attucks High School in Indianapolis that I don't think has found a place to go yet. So I think building out the freshman class would be something to keep an eye on as well. Strangely enough, I don't think any of the West Virginia commits, they had a top 25 class. I don't think any of them are coming, as best I can tell. They've reopened their recruitments, and it seems as though none of them are really giving Indiana a close look. I don't know who's driving that, if it's DeVries looking another direction or the recruits or some combination thereof, but that doesn't seem to be in play too much right now. How much more do you need to see on this thing developing before you would say fans should be optimistic, starting to look like a top 25 type team, things like that? Is it still too fluid, still too many missing parts for you to get there?
I think they can be optimistic that it's moving in that direction.
Yeah.
I think it's too early for people to say, bang, this is a top 25 team, top 4 seed in the tournament. Like, it's too early to say that when you have 7 players, 7 or 8 players, whatever it is, on the roster in total. And I mean, you're going to need to add at least 4 more players realistically in some capacity. So it's too early for me to say, okay, like they have that, but you can feel optimistic that it's heading in the right direction. It feels like, you think about the way the previous regime handled the portal, and Mike Woodson took all these big swings at the top names out in the portal, and you heard Indiana's name connected with just about everybody who entered the portal. So and so has heard from these schools, and Indiana's on the list somewhere with almost every guy. But then it suddenly felt like, you think back a couple of years ago with Dalton Connect, and when they didn't land Dalton Connect, and it suddenly just felt like, oh, what are they going to do now? Like, and suddenly Mackenzie Mbako comes in kind of out of nowhere, which seemed to be the Woodson specialty, was just pulling that stuff late. Same thing with Bryson Tucker too.
Yep.
After Derek Queen went to Maryland, but it's not the same way with this staff. It feels, they missed out on some of those early guys that, the Josh Dix and the Ryan Conwells that were linked with Indiana. And, I think there were fans that started to get that same feeling like, they had under Woodson, but it seems like they've just had a plan from the get-go, and they're not just contacting every single guy that goes into the portal. They're going for the guys they think are the right fit for their program. And I think that's what you want to see if you're a fan watching this whole thing play out, watching DeVries build up his program at Indiana and build this roster out. I think you want to see him being a little more selective with the guys he brings in, but also not just having to scramble and pull a rabbit out of the hat when you don't get a guy.
Yeah, and I think if Indiana fans have learned anything lately, it's not to hype the players that are added, because you just don't know how it's going to function as a team. But what you can say is, like, you think back to like Wisconsin, Purdue, teams that you thought coming into the season, it's like, they don't seem like they have a lot of talent, but it always works out. Like, as I said earlier, the magic happens in June when everybody arrives on campus. They start defining roles. They start getting buy-in. We saw this a little bit with DeVries last year at West Virginia. They got off to a really good start, played really well at Atlantis at a time when IU wasn't playing well. They obviously had the Tucker DeVries injury, which kind of sunk their season, but So there's some indication out there that he can do that along with his, turnaround of the Drake program. But I think I think it's a wait and see, both for how the roster is completed and just ultimately how it looks in November. I just don't see this being a big hype situation this time around. At least, at least that's a little bit of my hope because I my joke with everybody that asks like how's IU doing, it's like I always say they always win the off season, that they're like undefeated as the off season champs. But I would say let's just it doesn't take long either. Look at Archie Miller's first game, Indiana State, blown off the court. Look at some of the early non-cons Woodson had. I think like Florida Gulf Coast. Like
Mhm.
just ridiculously tight
They were
games.
the exhibition game where they were losing to
Yeah,
IU Indy at halftime.
yes, like the red flags are gonna be there if there are legitimate concerns. But so I don't think you're gonna have to wait long, and I don't think there's any point in hyping this thing too much either.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I think that's a good point to leave it. I
Mhm.
think we'll revisit this thing as the pieces continue to come together. We're I think I said this at the outset. It's April 17th. Spring game football is tonight. We'll have some sort of report from the field. I don't know if it'll reach the podcast, but it'll reach the YouTube channel. Seth and Owen will be there on the field, and we'll have a brief report. Since that thing is not on any sort of television, which I think is interesting, I think it's probably a byproduct of what we're seeing with coaches not loving that film being out there, is my speculation on that. So we'll do what we can to bring some insight as to how that whole thing went down. So look for that on the YouTube channel tonight if you happen to be catching this ahead of the spring football game. So we'll leave it right there. He's Seth Tao. I'm Mike Schumann for East 17th Street. We'll catch y'all later.